We take for granted that students coming in are digital natives. My security awareness program, if I could just get people to watch Ozark, right? The easiest way to prevent cybercrime is to unplug.
Welcome everybody to episode number 53 of Tuesday Morning Grind podcast. We are with George Finney today. George is the CISO at SMU. Been there about 18 years, so I can't wait to hear about that rise to fame. Also, author of a really good book called Well Aware, which we'll talk about today. George, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so first thing that stood out to me was 18-year tenure at SMU. That's pretty impressive, and it looks like you rose from the ranks from like analyst all the way to the leadership position, which is really cool because you don't see many people putting that kind of time in and moving up. So how did you get into security? How did your career go, I guess? How did you get to where you are?
Well, I love saying I worked my way up from the email room, because that's, when I grew up, that was the way you did it, right? You worked your way up, and you're right. There's so many people that move around so much, and you almost have to these days to keep advancing in your career. But SMU has been such a great place to work. We do a lot of promotion from internally, and that's one of the reasons why I've stayed so long. But I actually started my career as a network engineer. I worked in telecom, so I was with GTE back before they were Verizon, and SBC back before they were AT&T, and really started on the network side. But I made a change early on in my career to move to some startups. And, of course, that was during the .com bubble. So not all of the startups made it. But I got to teach myself system administration. So I'm very excited that this is episode 53 because I ran DNS for a number of years. So I've got this broad base. And after my startup experiences, most of which that didn't go very well, I decided to go to law school. Again, I was thinking I would go be a patent attorney, and again, got another view of the world from a legal perspective. And luckily, I did not go into practice law. I am a licensed attorney. But my boss at the time made me an offer to run security here at SMU. And bring that diverse perspective, right? Both network and systems, as well as legal, compliance, policy, having that big picture has been an interesting ride, right? There's so many things we do in higher ed that probably my peer CISOs at corporations would be just aghast at. But we have to think about things from the user perspective, right? We've got students on campus. There's a lot of mix of varieties of things we do, whether it's running essentially an ISP for 15,000 people, or having essentially running a hotel chain, right, with all the students that live here. We have 5 large entertainment venues on campus, whether it's a football stadium or basketball stadium or event center. So right, there's so many weird things that go on. We're kind of at the intersection of lots of different compliance regimes, and at the same time, we have probably a tenth of the resources that some of our corporate friends do. So, I think if you can make it in higher ed, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah, when I think of higher education, I was kind of thinking about what would it be like to be IT or CISO in higher ed. And you're kind of rattling off some of the same thoughts I had. There's food services, there's classroom services, there's events. It's almost like managing a small community because of the population and all the diverse types of activities that you have to support. How is it structured for you? Like, what's your team? Do you have a team of security analysts? Is it by division? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so we certainly have our fingers in a lot of the pies, right? And we do embed some of our folks into like different projects that IT takes on. But I've got a small team, right? I've got 4 direct reports on the cyber side. I also do physical security, so we run cameras and card readers and everything else. So On the cyber side, though, right? Everybody kind of has to do everything. In terms of apps, right? I know a lot of folks who say I talk to or interview, coming onto my team. They're definitely specialists in like a specific technology, which is interesting. Except when you come to my team, gosh, you have to be able to to do 5 or more different applications, supporting them being the person that runs those, which is a challenge, right? So not anybody or everybody coming to the team has the background and the experience with all of those different kinds of tools, right? You may have just been the lead person doing vulnerability management. That's cool. We're going to ask you to do more, and I think, gosh, that's a really great way to get started in security. Because a lot of the entry level jobs out there are like a SOC analyst role, which is cool, but you're going to have a very limited view of the world. Or if you're just a basic security engineer running a firewall, awesome, you're going to get a lot of experience. But if you have also insight into other areas, I think that's going to set you up for a lot of long-term success in your career. And I think that's part of why folks like me and some of the other members of my team stay here for so long, is because you do get to do so many different interesting things over time. And if we can do them efficiently and get them done quickly, then yeah, I think we can support a lot more than maybe just the one thing, and feel like we're pigeonholed into that thing for the rest of our career.
Yep, you have there's two. You have the we'll talk about a little bit, the cybersecurity personality tests, which I think is interesting. But one of the things I was thinking about for you guys, like what is the structure of the typical university security team? And what I mean by that is, like, how are you using your time? Is it like a lot of cybersecurity assessment activities? Is it mostly compliance? Is it operationally focused where you're using tools and tech, some hybrid thereof? Like, how does your team spend most of their time day to day?
Yeah. So, I think all of the above. We may be called in to look at compliance because our organization got a grant from a particular organization that requires us to be in compliance with X, Y, or Z. We take a lot of credit cards for various reasons on campus. So obviously PCI is a factor, but we also have an outsourced SOC. So we're constantly getting alerts from them where maybe we have to go investigate. We work with our legal team, and maybe we have to be involved in an e-discovery issue, we're more on the operations side. So, we're getting troubleshooting requests to, hey, this isn't working anymore. Can you go help, solve why this issue isn't working? We're embedded into new IT transformation projects that, hey, we're doing this new cool thing for IT. Well, let's have a security guy or girl there, so that hey, if there's an issue that comes up, or the vendor's asking us to open up SSH to the internet, well, actually, no, we're not going to do that. But we need that kind of insight and be in those conversations to make it happen. And I think, yeah, we've got to be able to be everywhere at once. And man, it's a super challenging job. But again, I would get bored if it wasn't this challenging.
That's why you stick around. Are there things that you think in a university setting that you guys are particularly worried about that might be the same or different than like corporate setting, like in terms of threats or just cybersecurity issues?
I think the unique challenge of universities is just that we have, our customers, AKA the students, it kind of mixed in with your enterprise, right? So whereas at another corporation, your clients are all separate, right? And you can deal with them very separately. In higher ed, they're here. Sometimes they play double duty, right? Sometimes they're employees and as a student worker and a student who lives on campus. So sometimes you might be an employee taking a class, right? So those roles are very gray a lot of the time. We also have volunteers and community members and parents that all maybe have to have accounts and connections into the university. So, you're right. I think you said it earlier. We're a lot like a small city, in terms of all of the different things we have to engage in. And in some ways, we're more customer service oriented than maybe a city, because we're actually providing a lot of those services directly rather than through some other service.
Yep. How did SMU handle the COVID stuff? Did you guys go hybrid and have to support all that just like everyone else?
Yeah, exactly. So we, our students left for spring break, and thinking that they would come back, and they couldn't come back to campus. So, lots of challenges there, right? Students had to get their belongings, right? We ended up shipping a lot of things to folks because, with travel restrictions, they couldn't come back to campus. We had to, really in that week of spring break, we had to retrain all of our faculty and staff to be able to teach online. And the interesting thing, we embed our security training into all of our training. So while we were teaching, faculty members to teach online, we were also helping educate them about Zoom bombing and working remotely securely. And making sure like their environment didn't have like a whiteboard in the background with their password written on it in giant letters, right? So all of those things, I would say, you had to take into account going into the pandemic. But really, March of 2020, I had just gone through my annual performance review with my boss, and I had all these goals lined up for the whole year, and we just got all of them done in like 2 weeks. So I had to kind of retool and like, well, what else are you going to do for the year, George? I think I'll do this or that. So we are. I mean, you asked earlier, are we compliance driven? I think you have to have a balanced approach, right? You have to always be finding your blind spots, the areas that you aren't doing well, and help find them and overcome them. So, and that was one of the things that I think going into the pandemic, we were actually positioned kind of, pretty well. We had rolled out MFA, pretty extensively. So, getting that final push, we definitely were able to overcome some hurdles there more easily than we would have otherwise.
Yeah. How well do you think most universities were prepared to like make the shift to remote? Because from my sense, the typical classroom setting, everybody's coming to campus. That's kind of part of the college experience. Although I know many universities were already doing some remote classes, but was there like a huge burst of new technology needed? Obviously those new training, what was that surge like?
I think it really varied between university and university. So, we were able to keep, classes at the same time of day, and, they just became Zoom classes. So we tried to keep the same student experience, whereas other universities, maybe they couldn't afford a Zoom license, for all of their campus. And they ended up just doing like video recordings, and the students could just watch those on demand later. So very different approach, but, one of the issues we found early on was with students, usually they could go to labs, and they have specialized software in those labs to do an assignment for a particular course. Now they can't get access. So how are we providing access? Okay, cool. We've got VPNs, or we've got, virtual hosted environments or virtual desktops. What's the right method to deliver that? And actually, the different software vendors out there make it really hard to license in a virtualized environment where it's cloud or other otherwise available. So those challenges were really difficult to work through. And yeah, I think some universities still struggle with that. But I also think on the flip side, it's really validated the online learning model. And if you're a University of Phoenix student, I think 10 years ago it was seen as kind of a lesser thing, right? Whereas now I think those same kind of experiences are going to be maybe embraced a little more. Which is probably a good thing. I think it makes higher education more attainable for a lot more folks. So, I hate to focus just on the negative aspects of the pandemic. I think definitely there have been some positives that come out of it as well.
Did you guys? I always hear anecdotes of like you mentioned Zoom bombing or additional phishing attacks and attack types and social engineering, like all the stuff that kind of spiked around the pandemic. Did you guys notice any upticks and different things that were new?
We definitely did. We know. I mean, the stat last year was, the FBI reported phishing increased like 800% in the first few months of the pandemic, and it was fascinating. A lot of campuses got federal funding to give to students in need, and so we were, like a lot of other colleges, were passing along like $1,500 checks to students, who had financial, aid or whatever coming to them. And it was fascinating because the scammers, whether they're doing gift card scams or other weird work scams, all of a sudden we're like keying in like, hey, give us $1,500 in gift card checks, and we'll, give you an employment check of $3,000 to your account. Just set it up. We'll do all of. And of course, it's a scam, and they didn't come back. But yeah, anytime there's an opportunity for threat actors or cyber criminals to find money that they think they can get out of folks, they're going to do it.
Yeah, I would think the university, on the one hand, a university has a lot of young tech savvy individuals, so there's the advantage of that. On the other hand, I think about like the fact that there's probably 100 different device types that you have to support, and you can't put MDM on every endpoint. Yeah, you can't train every university student the same way. Everything has to be a SaaS app or a virtual machine, so all the support that comes with that. So it's a really interesting kind of attack vector to have to protect, but also to try to exploit, compared to like a university or a corporate setting that is more standardized, I guess.
Well, it's interesting, we kind of take for granted that students coming in are digital natives, right? And they've been using technology since they were born. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're also super tech savvy, right? Sometimes they're a little naive, and it was fascinating. We talked to one of the students after they were scammed, unfortunately. But the thing that tipped them off, and the reason that they came to talk to us, was that they'd been watching Ozark. I don't know if you're familiar with that show, right? But I mean, they were watching Ozark, and one of the scams that was going on in the show, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly like the scam I just fell for. Oh wait, I'm never going to get that money back. How can I find some help?" And man, if my security awareness program, if I could just get people to watch Ozark, right, that would be, such a light bulb moment for folks to go. And really that's what I've spent most of my career focusing on. Isn't actually technology at this point. It's, hey, how do we get my users to think more critically about the ways they interact with technology, and how do they, make sure that they have a repeatable process for finding a phishing message and not clicking on it, right? That just in and of itself, I think, would be transformative.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed when I was listening to another one of your talks, and it was about your book, Well Aware, and I picked up pretty quickly the balance between technical cybersecurity talks and like the soft skill part of cybersecurity. And it felt like your book was heavy on the soft skill part. How did you find the time, get the inspiration, get the idea to write the book and kind of structure it in that way? What's the story behind the book, I guess?
Yeah. So, I actually get to teach cyber to undergrads here at SMU. And, one of the interesting observations that I have is, man, the way that we teach cyber is super technical. It doesn't make sense to even like computer science students, right? Think about that. Like, they're already really smart kids. They understand how the technology works, but then you talk cyber to them, and it doesn't make sense. And so, I take that a step further. I want to make sure that cyber is being taught in business schools, right? Or to existing CEOs, right? If CEOs are getting fired today, oh my gosh, I think it's anybody who aspires to be in those kinds of leadership positions, you've got to see the writing on the wall that if I don't know cyber, right, that there's another guy out there who's got my same qualifications that's going to understand that. So there's a lot of incentive out there to go, I think, understand cyber. But, if you're also one of those professionals, right, you've gone through, your 7 habits of highly effective people training. You've read Good to Great, or what got you here won't get you there, right? So there's not one of those books that's written for professionals that's about cyber, and so that's why I set out to write the book the way that I did. And I really, so in the book I argue that there are 9 cybersecurity habits. So I'm shamelessly stealing Stephen Covey's book idea. But as I go through it, right, it's not stories about me. I tell the stories of other successful business leaders or cyber leaders that have made a difference and kind of exemplify one of the different habits. And so, I started this process of, hey, I've got to go now learn, the neuroscience behind why we do certain things. Let's look at psychology and how psychologists help people to overcome, learned issues, right? And there are lots of techniques out there to recover from surgery, right? To heal faster through your using your brain. And I think we can apply those same lessons, but again, giving that framework of a story. And here's how the CEO of the Girl Scouts rolled out their cyber merit badge program, and how, oh my gosh, if we can take those same lessons and apply them to helping our own employees develop their own cyber literacy, that's huge. But it was just one of this passion projects, and it took 3 years to write. And mostly because, I only write on the weekends. So I'll jot down notes like during the week. And then, on Saturdays, I kind of take a few hours to pull my research together into hopefully an interesting story.
So there's 9. I'm going to read them off for people who haven't read the book. There's literacy, skepticism, vigilance, secrecy, culture, diligence, community, mirroring, and deception. So I can see how all of those are applicable for sure. Like I was kind of telling the story of myself for each of those. Now, walking into this, I think I heard on one of the talks that you gave that you did like 100 or several hundred interviews over the course of writing this book. Did you have these 9 in mind in advance, or did those reveal themselves to you like after hearing the same types of stories over and over?
So I actually tried to reverse engineer the habits. So I started with this giant list of all of the tips and tricks and advice we give in security, like never write your password down on a Post-it note. So helpful advice, good to know. But I tried to categorize those. That was where I started. And so distilling those down into, I actually arrived at like 8 different categories. And then as I started talking to more people, this isn't really one category, this is 2, or this category, that really belongs in this other area. So it kind of naturally evolved over time. And I think, is it an exhaustive list? Is there a 10th habit hiding out there? I don't know.
That's for the second book.
But I think, the first question that people ask about the book is cool, 9 habits. That's a lot, George. Oh my gosh. Where do I begin? And that's why you mentioned earlier, I developed a cybersecurity personality test. So the idea is, we make security so scary. And I think particularly in organizations that do have security teams, right, we have this idea of a division of labor, right? So as soon as there's somebody with that job title, security person, then all my security stuff just goes to them, right? I don't have to do it anymore. And that's not the case with the way security works. Everybody has to play a role. But if they're scared of it, if we've been using fear, uncertainty, and doubt to fund our security programs, they're going to naturally be wary of that. So I think with the personality test, you'll go through 22 questions. They're non-technical questions, but it's really more about values and the way you would do certain things. So that will kind of help highlight your biggest internal cybersecurity strength and your biggest external cybersecurity strength. And that unique blend of herbs and spices, so to speak, is really, the magic that makes you the unique security person that you are. So, in talking to different folks, I don't think the sample size is big enough yet to say, but I think, say if you're a SOC analyst, I think there's some danger of you getting burnt out if you're not really aligned for that role. And so I think, I would love to be able to use this as a tool for new folks coming into the cyber profession, but also, to help build the identities of, business leaders to believe, hey, I have something to contribute because I'm a cybersecurity explorer. Or I'm a cybersecurity believer, and here's what that means, and here's how my whole team aligns around these habits. So I can see, okay, am I representing all the habits? Are we covered? Or do my business goals really align with requiring a heavy representation of skepticism, for example, in my business model? But helping make those decisions, I think, is really critical to like you say, to aligning the soft parts of security with the more technical aspects.
Yeah, cybersecurity is interesting because if you take a look at another profession, like say a CFO or even a CEO, it seems intuitive that different types of organizations would want different kinds of CEOs or CFOs. So if I'm a startup, I probably want a CFO who's gotten funding before. If I'm a Fortune 500, I want a CFO that's managed a huge organization before. But when it comes to security leadership, there's like not clear. Like it's kind of like most folks perceive it as one size fits all, regardless of organization size and shape, and they don't. It's just not common parlance yet into how you should structure the security organization. So we do something called View CISO services, and I did a similar thing that you did, in that we came up with CISO archetypes. So I think one of the ones we came up was like the executive, meaning they're going to manage a team. We came up with like the product security expert, the IT oriented one, the ops oriented, etc. And similarly, we kind of have a personality side. So if someone wants to structure an organization around their objectives, they can say, what kind of CISO do I need to support the organization based on our business objectives? And I see a little bit of that in the cybersecurity personality test, because folks are going to have natural inclinations and have better fits here and there. So I like that a lot.
I love that, just because, asking the question, right, gets people thinking, right? And if you never ask the question, what kind of CISO would be the right fit in your organization, and maybe here are a handful of options, right? I haven't gone through that thought process yet. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're about in cybersecurity, right? We want to ask those questions in part to help educate and open people's minds to all of the risks and challenges we've got to face, collectively.
Yeah, I mean, the CISO can be. Does that really mean I'm going to handle compliance all day and I'm a GRC specialist, or does that mean like I'm 50% IT and I'm going to be deploying laptops, or some other, or am I going to be board facing? So I need to be an executive and do risk assessments. And to your point, like asking the question is a good place to start, because there's totally different skill sets based on someone's background. I have some CISOs in my network that are what I classify as builders. Like if you're a young company and you need somebody to build a program, you bring those folks in and they can build it from 0 to 100 quickly, efficiently, and great. But once the organization gets mature, like they're out of there because they're not good with bureaucracy. They're not good at reporting up. Then I have other CISOs that are like the true executive. You put them in a boardroom, you give them a big team, they're great at it, but they're not good at building. So some of those skills are just like, I could tell that we're still at an immature stage as a cybersecurity profession, because we haven't kind of formalized that approach quite yet.
Well, it's hard to compare ourselves, right? So if we're comparing ourselves to like CFOs, I mean, the accounting rules have been essentially the same for the last 100 years. The CFO was entrenched as a executive level position for 100 years. The first CISO was really named CISO 22 years ago. So yeah, we've totally still got a long ways to go. And we should be okay with that, right? I mean, it's going to evolve. Yeah, I don't think we can be all things to all people, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's exciting. That makes if I look at kind of our maturity curve as a profession, you're saying like cybercrime still going up rapidly, which is unfortunate. You see regulation still sorting itself out, states and federal and different countries. Job descriptions aren't stable yet. Huge talent shortage. We're still creating the vocabulary. We haven't settled on like a standard set of vocabulary to talk about these problems, which are all really frightening challenges. But as a professional in the midst of it, that's a really cool place to be. Like the bottom of that curve, headed up and have a chance to make a difference in the whole, ecosystem is pretty neat.
I mean, again, like I said earlier, right? If I'm not challenged, I get bored easily. So,
Yeah.
I think this is. I mean, I never thought that I would be at this place in my career where I feel like I can contribute, at 100%, and yeah, this is definitely where I want to be.
Have you seen universities standardize at all? Or like if I look at XYZ University versus SMU versus another, are they fairly consistent or are they wildly different as well?
I would say that they're pretty different. It could, for a community college is going to be structured very differently from a public university. Private universities that aren't state owned are going to work very differently than state operated universities. Different regulations may apply. Some universities may have their CISOs reporting directly to a CIO. I think that's pretty common. But where your CIO reports is going to be wildly different from university to university. You might have one reporting to a CFO, another might report to a provost or some academic department. Some might report directly to the president. Others, might report to like a dean of the libraries, for example. It's really all over the place, and I think we're struggling to standardize a little bit, and I think higher ed in general is kind of struggling with that same issue overall, because we're all aware that tuition at every university is too high. How do we reduce that and also continue to provide very high levels of instruction and education to folks, and also do research and all of the other things that universities are known for, right?
Yep.
It's a struggle. I don't think anybody's got a magic bullet at this point.
Do you have an opinion about the optimal structure? Or it probably varies from university to university, but have you seen something work fairly well in terms of reporting structures?
I mean, I don't want to say I'm at the perfect university, but certainly I think the higher you report in the organization, the more seriously security is taken. So having a CIO for us that reports directly to the president, it works really well. I think there's a tendency to have an us versus them mentality sometimes. So if you're in any one embedded department, other departments may or may not work with you. A lot of universities are very decentralized, meaning there's a centralized IT group, and then there are lots of other IT people who work directly in departments that don't report into central IT. I don't think that's necessarily negative. However, it's really challenging.
Yep.
To run a security organization where half of the IT staff is decentralized and you don't know what they're doing, and there's no authority to be able to make needed changes, right? So in terms of blind spots, like I talked about earlier, man, how do you discover those and make sure you're able to respond quickly and efficiently? It's a huge challenge, and we expect lots of universities may be required to be in compliance with CMMC or NIST in the coming couple of years. That's going to be revolutionary, and it's going to be a challenge for universities to meet that without some major structural changes.
I've talked to other CISOs in the private sector, and one of the things that they have said is that the increased awareness at the board and executive level has been good for them, because they're not walking into a room educating first and then trying to get people on board. It's really the board and leadership proactively asking about cybersecurity and wanting to dedicate resources to it. Have you seen the same thing in the university setting in terms of like boards of regents or presidents and stuff asking questions about cybersecurity?
Absolutely. They ask really phenomenal questions. Even some of the what I would think of as more non-technical leaders. Man, I really applaud those boards of directors. That I think they do take their jobs very seriously. And they've worked really hard to educate themselves in a lot of ways, and it really does show.
That's great. What about I always like to think about the future, and when it comes to like your things you're worried about and things you're optimistic about, what are your biggest concerns like looking out into the future. Like, and for context, we're seeing increased cyber crime. I think I read a report that's supposed to be at like 10 trillion in the next few years, which is like a 10x growth. Lots of breaches. We're seeing what's happened with ransomware. There's kind of an asymmetry out there in terms of it makes a lot of sense for criminal organizations to do what they're doing because it doesn't cost them a lot, but the profits opportunities are huge. And there's no clear like resolution on how we're going to fix this from a technical perspective. So that's the bad side. What keeps you up at night as a security professional?
You know, it feels like to me we're at a tipping point kind of time, right? If the cybercrime continues to increase the way it's been increasing, right, exponentially, it seems like, you know, I think at some point in the next few years, you know, businesses will start to stop, you know, connecting so heavily to the internet, right? You know, the easiest way to prevent cybercrime is to unplug. You know, I mean, I think that poses a challenge in, you know, something like higher ed where, you know, we struggle to share open ideas. But if we can't get it right, you know, maybe we'll stop, you know, interconnecting so much. And I think that would be a negative, right? I mean, that worries me. You know, but I also think it's hard to overcome, you know, people's natural distrust of, you know, complete monitoring, right? So, you know, I will jokingly refer to myself sometimes when I talk to faculty members here as Big Brother. Because I mean, honestly, that's what they're calling me behind my back. But you know, I don't read people's email like you know, for fun, like at night when I go home with, you know, eat my popcorn, right? I don't monitor our cameras and you know, again, you know, whatever that's I just don't have that kind of time. But that's the level of trust deficiency that we're at. It just collectively in our culture, right? You know, or society. I think we've got to be able to demonstrate trust to folks, and you know, welcome them into the conversation, right? That's what I talk about in the book. Is we can't use fear as the only tool in our tool belt, right? And because we know fear shuts people down, it prevents them from learning new things. It's a great way to get them to avoid doing certain things, but there's so many things that we need them to do proactively to help be a part of the security solution. So, you know, yeah, I mean, I think we know it's going to be work, but, gosh, folks have to trust us. They have to believe in the mission and see that they're a part of that. So yeah, I think there's a real risk that it's going to continue to go in a negative direction. And I think that's going to require us to shut down.
That's a great point. Like with all of this enhanced digitization that we're seeing and all the cybercrime, and then companies try to combat it with monitoring and tools and control. And then you add all the headlines onto that with, like, you know, name your favorite social media company. One of the societal risks is just that trust. Like no one trusts anything right now. You can't trust your email. You can't trust what's in the media. So it's like or maybe you can, but there's a concern about it. And that's an interesting phenomena that I think underpins this whole thing that we're dealing with when it comes to cybersecurity and privacy. How do you think you combat that?
Well, you know, I love the idea of zero trust, right? So, you know, there's so many things I can say about zero trust, but, you know, I think right now, again, we're at a tipping point, and it's really good to see the Biden executive order requiring that the federal government adopt zero trust, right? It's disappointing that they haven't already adopted it. But, you know, again, I think, you know, we have this, you know, this deficit when it comes to prevention. And again, we know that prevention is so much less expensive in the long run than having to clean up messes afterwards, right? It's a 10x return. That's why, as a strategy, people are embracing zero trust, right? Because it's the way that you get at prevention from your cybersecurity strategy. And I think, you know, we've talked for years, like, you know, I'm doing defense in depth. Defense in depth is cool, except that it's not actually a strategy for success because you can't measure it. You don't know when you're done. How many layers do I need when I have a defense in depth strategy? There's no answer for that. So, people call it expense in depth because it's just more and more expense as you add on more and more layers. And I think zero trust is a way of describing a strategy of prevention that ultimately will be more effective and the least expensive option for security that you can maintain. So my hope, honestly, is that more organizations embrace zero trust, the more that it gets out there, and hopefully it's not just dismissed as the next industry buzzword.
Yep. What about on the other hand? So we talked about like your fears, what you worry about when it comes to cybersecurity. What excites you? Like, why should people be optimistic about the future when it comes to cybersecurity?
Honestly, I think, I more so even than maybe my CIO counterparts out there. I think people recognize that security is a business issue, and again, when you see organizations embracing security, it's embraced at the highest levels. You see boards, right, like we talked about, embracing security and asking specific questions about it. Right, there, boards of directors aren't asking you specific interesting questions about your CRM, right? So I think it's just a different incentive structure, and I think that I think does paint a good picture for cybersecurity long term, right? When your executives are bringing you to the table, right? They want you to be there, but because, oh my gosh, we can't be the next organization that has a ransomware outbreak. What do we have to do to stop that? That's an awesome conversation to have, and I think just because cyber is in the news every day, we've got to be able to strike while the time is right. And that time is today, right? We can't wait, 5 years to start your security program, right? And I think, we're in an awesome position to be able to make a difference right now, which is, awesome in any career, right? But knowing that you can make a difference in security, it's an easy dotted line to connect.
Absolutely. Well, George, thanks so much for your time, for writing a great book, and for educating the next line of defense when it comes to cybersecurity. If you guys enjoyed content like this, you want to hear from security professionals, privacy professionals, you can check out the Tuesday Morning Grind podcast on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search for Risk 360. We have a playlist called Tuesday Morning Grind. You can also listen to us on any podcast app that you like to listen to podcasts. If you're looking to build, assess, or certify a security, privacy, or compliance program, you can check out Risk 360. That's what we do. That's what we help with. George, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Christian.